Olatunji. It's about 65 days to the conduct of the 2023 general election, and preparations for the polls are in top gear. Nigeria's Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, has paid a courtesy visit to the presidential candidate of the All Progressives Congress, APC, Asiwaju Bola Tinubu, at his residence in Abuja. This is the first time the Vice President will be visiting the APC presidential candidate after the APC primary election. The Department of State Services, DSS, says it has arrested 2 suspects over the attacks on offices of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, in Imo State. The State Director of DSS, Wilcox Idaminabo, said the agency had dislodged camps at Osu from where the hoodlums launched attacks. And on the interview segment for today, we examine the economic agenda of the APC presidential candidate, Asiwaju Bola Tinubu, with Senior Special Assistant to the President on Public Affairs and Deputy Principal Spokesperson of the APC Presidential Campaign Council, Ajuri Ingalale, as our guest tonight. Welcome to Politics Tonight. Stay with us. Welcome back to Politics Tonight. Now let's get to some stories. Nigeria's Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, has paid a courtesy visit to the presidential candidate of the All Progressives Congress, APC, Asiwaju Bola Tinubu, at his residence in Abuja. He was received by the APC Vice Presidential candidate, Senator Kashim Shettima, former governor of Edo State, Adams Oshiomhole, and other chieftains of the party. This is the first time the Vice President will be visiting the APC presidential candidate after the APC primary election, where the former governor of Lagos emerged as the ruling party's presidential flag bearer for the 2023 elections. The vice presidential candidate, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, declined to speak with newsmen on the essence of the visits. The Taraba State House of Assembly now has a new speaker. He is John Kizito Bunzena, who took over as speaker following resignation of Joseph Albasu Kunini. The former speaker made his position known through a letter deliberated upon by the lawmakers during an emergency session in Jalingo. The session, which was held at the hallowed chamber of the House about 8 in the morning, was presided over by the Deputy Speaker, Haman Adama Abdullahi. The letter by the former speaker said his resignation was based on personal reasons. In Zing State constituency, who was a former chairman of the House Committee on Education, as well as the chief whip of the 9th Assembly, has been sworn in as the new speaker of the House of Assembly.
Really happened this morning is normal in any State House of Assembly, or either State House of Assembly or National Assembly. It is normal. The former speaker resigned based on personal reasons. And as a house, we don't allow vacancy. That is why a new speaker was elected today. And by the grace of God, I happen to be the one that was elected to succeed him. So it is not a palace school. He is still one of us. He is so dear to me. I'm very close to him, and he is also very close to me.
The Department of State Services, DSS, says it has arrested 2 suspects over the attacks on offices of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, in Imo State. The State Director of DSS, Wilcox Idaminabo, said the agency has dislodged camps at Osu from where the hoodlums launched attacks. He spoke in Owerri at a meeting with the INEC resident electoral commissioner in the state, Professor Silva Uchenna Agu. And according to him, the raids led to the arrest of a leader and financier of the hoodlums in Osu. Welcome back. You're still watching Politics Tonight, digging beyond the headlines. And now to our interview with the first guest of the day. I am now joined by the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Public Affairs and Deputy Principal Spokesperson of the APC Presidential Campaign Council, Ajuri Ngelale. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
It's truly a privilege to be with you. Good evening to you and good evening to all of our viewers.
All right. Now, let's start by asking you this question. Now, do you think the country's economy will be in good hands with APC continuing in government?
Well, there's no doubt about the fact that challenges remain, which is why Nigerians will certainly appreciate where we came from and where we are, and of course, where we will be going to under the leadership of His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu. Let's set the groundwork first by establishing the fact that for essentially 40 to 50 years, we had neglected our critical infrastructure across multiple sectors of our national economy. Whether it's oil and gas pipeline infrastructure, running across the country that had been more or less neglected since the 1980s. The same thing can be said of our refineries. The same thing can be said of our road and bridge network across the country. The same can be said for power plants and dams across the country. The same can be said for airports and seaports across the country. So when His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari came into office in 2015, you were staring at a situation in which all of this infrastructure across these sectors had run down over the course of 40 to 50 years. You came into a situation in which your foreign reserves have been depleted from nearly $60 billion down to about $28 billion. You had come into a situation in which the excess crude account had seen inflows of $107 billion between 2004 and 2015. And over those 11 years, 105 billion out of 107 billion had been spent on zero infrastructure, zero social investment programs, and really zero in terms of dividends of democracy to our people, with President Muhammadu Buhari inheriting $2 billion in the excess crude account. So foreign reserves down, excess crude account essentially non-existent. And then, of course, the debt situation had gone from $35 billion national debt in 2010 to over $64 billion of national debt in 2014, at a time when we had historically the highest oil revenues we've ever received in our history, with nothing to show for it. All of this is to make the point that we came into a crisis situation in 2015. Certainly, President Muhammadu Buhari did. What have we done since then? And this is why when we say all is not yet uhuru, certainly that is the case. But when we talk about progress, we're talking about what we met and what we have today. And what we have today is we have a series of infrastructural, interventions across this country. If we talk about roads, just very quickly, I won't be able to list them all within the time of this program. But of course, we all know that the 300 billion naira Second Niger Bridge has been open for traffic. That was a project we've been investing in over the last several years under the Presidential Infrastructure Development Fund, an initiative of President Muhammadu Buhari, putting together essentially recovered loot from previous military and civilian administrations and applying it to infrastructure across the country. Obviously, in that region, you're familiar with the Lagos-Shagamu-Ibadan expressway, which had been abandoned for several decades. That is now nearing completion through the PIDF. And then, of course, we have the 200 billion naira Boni-Bodo Road, which is going to link NLNG production headquarters in Bonny Island to the mainland of our country for the first time in history, facilitating the easy road transportation of gas products, which really is going to be the future in terms of where we're going to be generating a massive amount of our revenues to further diversify our economy into agriculture, manufacturing, and the like. That is now being done by President Muhammadu Buhari under the PIDF, and will be completed by December 2023. Now, in addition to that, obviously you have major roadways, such as the Kano-Katsina Road going deep into the northwest, and then the Kano-Maiduguri Road going from the northwest to the northeast. You also have the Abuja-Kaduna-Zaria-Kano Expressway taking you from the Middle Belt into the northwest, which is obviously another major several hundred billion naira project under the Presidential Infrastructure Development Fund that's undergoing construction as we speak. And then, of course, that's just roads. Obviously, when you talk about other bridges, you have the major 60 billion naira local Oweto Bridge in the Middle Belt, linking Nasarawa and Benue, which is going to cut down travel times from the southeast to the northern part of the country by 5 hours. These are major interventions. Now, obviously, if you look, and I haven't even begun to list out what has been done in terms of roads under this administration. Right. And then, of course, the foundation that His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu will be taken to the next level. Now, if you're talking about railways, what was the situation of our railways in 2015, despite all the money that had been accumulated over the time and all the debts that had been accumulated and all of the reserves that had been depleted? Essentially, it was a 0-0 situation. There was nothing to talk about. In fact, even the colonial era railways had been run down to the point where they were almost unusable. So really what we're talking about now is we have 3 high-speed rail lines on ground within the last 8 years. Obviously, we inherited the Abuja-Kaduna rail line at about 70%. Over the course of that 16-year period, they were able to do 70% of one rail line. We took it to completion. Of course, you have the Lagos-Abeokuta-Ibadan rail line, and then, of course, you have the Wari-Itape 326-kilometer high-speed rail line that was done under this administration as well.
All right, now let's streamline this to your presidential candidate. Asiwaju Bola Tinubu has promised to deliver on its renewed hope to boost the economy if elected. But then why should Nigerians trust him to bring economic prosperity to them?
Thank you very much. And this is the fundamental point of the evening. When we say that we are going to do something as an administration, administrations under the All Progressive Congress, but particularly under the leadership of His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu, against those who are now running for the same office, the presidency of the Federal Republic, you'll know that the gap between our candidate and the others is really that issue of credibility. The fact that our candidate can look back and say, what did I inherit in Lagos State in 1999, and what have I left behind for future generations in terms of my legacy, in terms of what I have been able to achieve. And when you look at that and you compare that and contrast that with the other major contenders for the office, you will know that there's only one candidate in this race that has 2 legs to stand on with a proud legacy and track record of performance. Now, let's be very specific about what we're talking about. When His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu took office as the governor of Lagos State in 1999, you had a situation in which the Lagos State government, under the previous military administrations in the preceding, over the preceding decade plus, there had not been any financial statement issued, any financial audit or statement of account issued by any military administration in the 7 years previous to His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu taking office in Lagos State. Meaning that essentially you had a state that was running on overdraft, that was essentially back on its debt obligations, and really totally unable to mobilize the resources needed to take the state out of the kind of infrastructural and institutional deficit that it had put itself into over the period 1983 in the post-Chakande era, but pre-Tinubu era of 1983 to 1999. You saw a lot of decrepit neglect begin to take place. Now, what was done immediately was you go from a situation where you're generating 600 million naira a month in revenues, so approximately $6 million as at that time in revenues, in a situation in which your civil service, the Lagos State Civil Service at the time, had ghost workers eating up 50%. It's unimaginable today to imagine that 50% of the total payroll of Lagos State as of 1999 was being swallowed up by a ghost worker kind of cartel being run by just a few individuals, taking half essentially of the recurrent expenditure within the Lagos State civil service. So you had low revenues, and then you had a bloated civil service with all of these kinds of institutional malpractice going on. What did he do? Immediately putting to bear the massive experience he was able to garner as the chief accountant of a major international oil and gas company in Nigeria, Mobile. He was able to automate all of the processes around not just procurement, but also salary payment, and obviously conducting a forensic audit of the staff roles across all of the state MDAs, leading to a savings of half of the recurrent expenditure that was being paid out essentially to nobody but a few fat cats. Now, with that, you're able to stabilize the system. In addition to that, of course, we all know he put in place a new tax regime, establishing in his second time in office the Lagos Internal Revenue Service, which was really unique in the sense that it was set up as a semi-autonomous center that was set up more as a private enterprise as against being, a kind of an extension of the Lagos State Civil Service. So, for example, by professionalizing the state tax authority and putting in place a chairman according to the law establishing it passed by the Lagos State House of Assembly, you now had a situation where you bring the professional private sector expertise to conduct all of the operations, weed out all of the bureaucrats that were previously ineffective in terms of tax collection, and we've all seen what happened. Obviously, we've now seen a situation where the tax revenues in the state are done times 10 by the time we have left.
People say that Nigeria is more complex. Lagos only does not make up Nigeria. Comparatively with a candidate like Atiku Abubakar, who has been vice president for 8 years, what makes your candidates the best option for Nigeria?
No, and this is the point, right? Is many of the innovations that were brought by His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu in Lagos State had been taken to the federal level as a result of the modeling that he had put in place, from going across the country to find the very best hands from all states of the federation to comprise the state executive council, realizing that we have to professionalize government by weeding out, just poor hang-around politicians and putting in place men who had risen by dint of hard work and merit to the top of their various industries and professions, bringing them from around the world, really reversing brain drain, turning it into brain gain by going around the world to bring the best hands to govern all aspects, all sectors of Lagos State under his leadership. This is why when we say that His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu is going to deliver modern Nigeria as we will know it, based on the foundations laid by President Muhammadu Buhari, we have the confidence of his experience. And now you have mentioned one of his competitors, His Excellency Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, who, yes, was a former vice president. But the question is, what did you do when you were there? This is the question. When we ask the question about what Asiwaju did, the record is very clear in terms of what revenue was when he arrived, what the situation of the state was, infrastructure-wise, security-wise, environment management-wise, and what it is today, investment-wise, willingness to invest, education, healthcare, you name it, construction, you name it, and what it is today. And then when we talk about the former vice president's record, it's not an achievement to just be a vice president. It's a privilege to be a vice president. The achievement is what you do as vice president of the country. And so when we ask the former vice president, what did he do? We begin to look at the record and we realize why they don't, we now realize why they don't want to talk about his record. They'd rather talk about His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu, who is the clear front runner in this race, or they would rather, create straw men to begin to attack and all of that. Because there's nothing to run on. In fact, if you go deep, you will actually find that not only is there nothing in the way of positive achievement, but there is a lot in terms of negative events. And so look at what he did as the chairman of the Privatization Council, right? Where he sold off the Delta Steel Company, an asset worth over $1.89 billion for less than $30 million. And fortunately for us, we have a clear, now that it was almost 20 years ago, we have a clear track record in terms of what actually happened to that institution after he sold it off for pennies on the dollar. First of all, the company that he sold it to, which was known to him, was a company that now quickly, after obtaining that asset, the Delta Steel Company, quickly went to go and collateralize the assets, $1.8 billion worth of assets in that facility, taking out huge hundreds of millions of dollars in dollar loans from Nigerian banks, using the assets in Delta Steel Company as collateral. So basically cannibalizing the institution, taking these dollar loans and running abroad to buy houses in Singapore, London, and the US. That is what they were doing in privatization at that time. I have not even begun to talk about the over $3 billion aluminum smelting company in a five-bomb state that was sold off for about $140 million. The same story, cannibalized by one of his friends that took the assets of the institution and began to collateralize them for quick money they could take from Nigerian banks to run abroad and enjoy their lives at the expense of Nigerians and the commonwealth of the country. This is the history of Alhaji Atiku Abubakar as president, not to talk of the political instability between him and his boss at that time. So look, the history is clear. And so when we talk about His Excellency Asiwaju Tinubu, we don't even want to begin to talk too much about Alhaji Atiku Abubakar. That's a waste of time. What we want to focus on is not just what he was able to achieve as the legacy as a Lagos State governor, but what he's going to do for Nigerians once he's elected president by the grace of God in February next year. Your
candidate has had, meetings with several business communities in Lagos, and in one of such meetings, he promised double-digit growth, while the World Bank projects 3% by the end of 2023. How feasible is this?
Oh, it's absolutely feasible. In part because His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu is going to be in a situation that is totally different from any predecessor, of the office, in the sense that he's not going to be inheriting just 50 years worth of neglect, chaos across the board, massive insecurity across the country, and an empty treasury, effectively, like President Muhammadu Buhari inherited. He's going to be able to start with a foundation, and he alludes to this in many of his public engagements, how much he appreciates that President Muhammadu Buhari had put in place the reconstruction of the refineries, put in place the new oil and gas pipelines that will really change the face of Nigeria's revenue drive moving forward, with the Ajaokuta Kaduna to Kano gas pipeline and all of that, that will now be extended up through the Sahara into Western Europe, creating billions of dollars in new annual revenues for the Federation. Obviously, what President Buhari has done is well known: 5 new international airports, railways, and all the things that we've talked about. But what His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu is coming to do now is, let's say, if President Buhari has laid the foundation for modern Nigeria, we say it is His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu that will actually deliver modern Nigeria, the structure of modern Nigeria to Nigerians. How is he going to do that? First of all, His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu appreciates that we have a systemic problem around how we can create a better quality of life for Nigerians within their legitimate incomes. So His Excellency has said, look, Asiwaju said, look, what we are going to do, one of the first things he's going to do upon assumption of office is establish a consumer credit system, which is really going to have transformative effect across all sectors of the national economy. You're going to have a situation where we're going to, through the Central Bank of Nigeria, we're going to be incentivizing and compelling the banks in the country to set aside a significant portion of their lending for lending to the real sector, lending to the low-income and middle-income Nigerian person, who is going to be, trying to receive mortgages for housing, for example, or a lease-to-own arrangement for an automobile, for example. We realize that much of the corruption we have in the country today emanates from the fact that we are asking our people to find huge amounts of money that is totally outside the ambit of the level of their legitimate incomes to go and purchase a house. They're trying to find money to purchase a car, trying to find money to purchase a freezer or a refrigerator for their homes, to purchase a generator, so many other things, right? What we are now saying is that if we have this credit available to the ordinary, to the common man in our country, what we will now have is a situation where we will disincentivize corruption massively in a preventative way as against a reactive way. Then also what we will do is massively increase the standard of living in the country by ensuring that they have access to the goods that for a long time only elites have had access to. And then thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, when you have Nigerians, millions of Nigerians, being able to off-take homes through a mortgage provision, or being able to off-take new automobiles through a lease-to-own arrangement within the means of their legitimate incomes. When you have that, you have now created two massive job-making industries. When we talk about housing construction, you're dealing with millions of Nigerian youths, who can be building these homes with Nigerian-sourced cement, with Nigerian-sourced glass that's manufactured from Nigerian-sourced sand. And all of that value from top to bottom will be coming down to the Nigerian economy, importing nothing in the process, so that not only are you using local ingredients, local products to construct these homes, but you're creating millions of jobs indirect by, obviously off-taking these materials from the suppliers, but then directly by bringing young men and women who are able-bodied to actually build these homes. So everybody wins. You create the jobs, you create the wealth, indirect and direct, and then you also ensure that every Nigerian in our country has that dignity that comes with home ownership, which we're desperate to give our people. So look, the key here is appreciating that what we're going to do is the CBN is going to be offering enhanced monetary policy ratios, enhanced interbank settlement offers to the domestic money banks in the country to ensure that they are incentivized to provide that lending to the real sector, to the ordinary Nigerian citizen. Now, what's going to happen from that point is, and I'm going to break this down very clearly, in the housing sector, His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu is going to be working very closely with the 10th National Assembly upon its inauguration in June. And what's going to be happening is he's going to immediately go to work on reforming the Land Use Act, making sure that we can work with the state assemblies and the state governments across political lines to ensure that we streamline and standardize all of the process relating to access to land, so that we have a universal framework and timeline around the time between applying for a piece of land, a plot of land, and accessing and actually receiving the CFO to begin construction. We're going to do that across the country immediately. On top of that, we're now going to be incentivizing developers, because this is very key. It's one thing to ensure that the banking industry is incentivized to lend to the real sector, so that trillions of naira in capital are available for Nigerians to access. It's another thing entirely to incentivize developers to develop the social housing projects across the country. This is housing for low-income and middle-income Nigerians to access the housing. So what we're going to do is, under the Tinubu administration, we're going to be providing tax grants, tax credits, and rebates to developers who develop the bulk quantum of their developments to social housing, low and middle-income housing. Then those who want to build their condominium skyscrapers and mansions for the rich, they can do that, but they will do it without government incentivization. The incentivization will be for those providing social housing.
Mr. Ajuri, we still have a lot to discuss on the economic agenda of your candidates, but then let's take this quick break and we will be right back. Please stay with us.
In the month of December, on the 1st, it is World AIDS Day. On the 3rd, attention shifts to persons living with disabilities, and December 9th is dedicated to International Anti-Corruption Day. 10th is Human Rights Day, while the 11th is the 2nd anniversary of the abduction of over 300 students in Kankara, Katsina State. On the 12th of December, the World Health Organization dedicates the day as Universal Health Coverage Day. On the 17th of December, the abducted Kankara boys were freed 6 days after. 18th of December is set aside as International Migrants Day. It is the last month of the year. Brace yourself for an interesting December. Stay with TVC News.
Welcome back to Politics Tonight, and I still have with me the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Public Affairs, Mr. Ajuri Ngelale. Thank you for staying with us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, before we went on that break, you spoke about systemic problem, and I must tell you that financial experts, economic experts, and opinion holders have in the last few years, called for cutting the costs of doing governance as one of the major components to stabilizing our economy. I would like to ask you, is your candidate ready to do this?
One thing that the record of His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu shows very clearly to anybody who becomes familiar with what he has already achieved in Lagos State is that he lacks nothing in the form of political will to get something done. This is somebody who will push the envelope as far as he needs to go to ensure that he achieves that goal that he has set out for his administration for the benefit of Nigerians. One of the areas where this becomes very obvious is if you look at what the situation was around environmental management in Lagos State, where you had heaps and piles of refuse in 1999 lining the streets across the state, right? We had seen a situation where that had been totally transformed by reforming the bureaucracy around waste management. Of course, it's no secret to Lagosians in terms of that the Lagos State Waste Management Authority was set up to ensure that the processes around environment management are effectively managed to such an extent that you would now take what is a detriment to the society and turn it into a bonus or an advantage to the society. What do I mean? Right now, you have thousands of horticulturalists, those who are dealing with, the various value chains related to planting trees, ensuring that those heaps of refuse have now been replaced with beautification. So on the one hand, you've dealt with the refuse problem, but what you've actually done is, in dealing with that problem, you've now replaced it with an opportunity. Because now with these fresh lots of land that had been essentially overtaken by heaps of refuse, been able to now map out, his administration mapped out the beautification and the gardening system that had been put in place across the state, using those youths that we used to call area boys. Today are those now planting trees across the state. They are those now changing the light bulbs on the street lights. They are those now handling the maintenance of public utilities across the state. This is the kind of visionary leadership we're talking about. So when we talk about cost of governance specifically, right, I started the conversation discussing how half of the civil service payroll was essentially made up of ghost workers. Already at the federal level, President Muhammadu Buhari had put in place so many different measures to automate the payments of and obviously add digital identification of all federal civil service workers. So we've also at the federal level been able to already save about 200 billion naira annually through the removal of federal ghost workers since 2015. So that's already been done largely. And that, by the way, that template was laid by His Excellency then Governor Bola Tinubu in Lagos State. So for us, the focus now is about ensuring that what he was able to do in the state bureaucracy was to say, look, you're going to have individuals who are highly skilled and mid-level skilled and then low skilled workers, right? Through decades of failed recruitment processes, you're going to get all sorts of individuals with all sorts of levels of competence. What we don't want is we don't want to compound the unemployment problem in the country by doing mass layoff. And he found the same problem in Lagos State. So what he did was, instead of doing mass layoff of the state bureaucracy at that time, when he found that there were a lot of less skilled workers in the state bureaucracy, what he now did was very creatively said, look, what are those jobs that need to be done? Less knowledge-based skills, but are still physically able, that can help build the state. And then let's give them those jobs. And that's how he now began to find opportunities for them, creating the Lagos State Traffic Management Agency, LASMA, right, where his administration was able to put in place many area boys, but also not just area boys, also bureaucrats who proved ineffective in their work. He will put them in uniform and have them managing traffic so that they earn their pay.
Mr. Ajuri, I asked this question because according to your candidate, he believes that you have to revitalize the economy by expanding the budget size to accommodate government's programs and projects. But experts have said this will not work. So once again, is your candidate ready to cut the cost of governance?
Absolutely, which is why I've just spent time really breaking down how he had already done it when he was the governor of Lagos State. And the fact that the APC-led administration at the federal level under President Muhammadu Buhari had already begun many of those same measures at the federal level, which he will now, of course, accelerate and deepen. So for us, it's very key when we talk about the credibility question in terms of reducing the cost of governance, professionalizing governance, ensuring that the bureaucrats that are in place are aligned with the political leadership. It was in Lagos State that His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu put in place a series of engagements between the institutional leadership, the entrenched institutional leadership in the civil service. We're talking of directors, deputy directors, assistant directors, permanent secretaries, and the like, putting them face to face with the new political leaders, the commissioners, the special advisors, the SSAs in his government and in succeeding governments, to ensure that there's synergy in terms of how the bureaucracy is run. We believe, in short, that wherever you have bloated government, you can effectively create the opportunities for those who are less skilled while maximizing the skill set of those who are highly skilled within the bureaucracy, so that we can ensure that Nigerians are getting value for whatever they're paying their civil servants.
All right, let's go deep into the 2023-2027 plans in the renewed hope. What are the plans for oil and gas, which, remains Nigeria's biggest revenue earner?
A very, very fundamental question, and which is why we're very fortunate to have a presidential candidate who has extensive, decades-long history in the sector from the private sector end, somebody who helped establish the financial accounting regime and system that one of the world's most profitable companies, Saudi Aramco, is still using till this day. And obviously his experience in Mobile. He's going to bring that to bear, of course, as president and commander-in-chief. He's going to be in a position to ensure that all of those bottlenecks, all of those points at which the shoe is pinching the foot of investors in that sector, in the oil and gas sector, that we remove those bottlenecks and make it easy for them and really incentivize them. Fortunately for our presidential candidate, His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari had put in place the the Petroleum Industry Act, which had already now provided the incentivization framework for enhanced investment in the sector. That is obviously going to help. But in addition to that, let's be clear with Nigerians about what our candidate is promising in the oil and gas sector in terms of deliverables between 2023 to 2027. First and foremost, he has determined that within the first term of his administration, he's going to take oil production from the current 1.6 million barrels per day as of today in the country to 2.6 million barrels per day of oil production by 2027. That is the end of his first term. That is going to be done through a series of measures that include obviously enhanced investment in the deep offshore, which is already taking place through the incentivization framework laid out in the Petroleum Industry Act passed by Mr. President. But in addition to that, he is actively about encouraging indigenous companies to really take up those assets that are being left behind by the international oil companies as they pursue deep offshore opportunities. We want to enhance local content in the oil and gas sector. That is investments and projects owned by local companies in the sector to about 70% by 2030. That is the target. So he is willing to do that, and he's making sure that he mobilizes indigenous Nigerian investors in the sector to really take advantage of the onshore opportunities as well as the deep offshore. That is how we're going to get to the 2.6 million barrels by 2027. In addition to that, we know that President Muhammadu Buhari had really begun the emphasis on moving aggressively from oil into gas. But while we are in oil, it's also important to note that the PIA has established a framework in which 30% of the revenues going to the NNPC Limited is now being set aside for exploratory activities. That is exploration. It's no longer news that we have begun drilling oil in the northeast in the Kolmani oil mining field, a $3 billion investment that includes foreign investment as well. That has already begun, but that was based on a move by President Muhammadu Buhari to ensure that we invest massively in exploration so that when taps begin to run dry in some parts of the Niger Delta, we already have new production replacing it and expanding. So right now, as I speak to you, we have exploration going on, not just in the Bida Basin, as well as in the Northeast, but also across the country, even in the Southeast, where we have exploration going on in the Anambra Basin. We have exploration going on across the geopolitical zones. So there's a lot to look forward to in terms of new oil drilling opportunities across the country with enhanced exploration. So that's a major part of where we're going to get the new production from as well. Now, in addition to that, if you look at gas, the APC has put in place the $12 billion NLNG Train 7, which is expanding our gas production capacity by a third of our existing capacity, essentially adding a third to our current existing capacity, a third of our total current existing production capacity to that total. So that's going to be on ground. In addition to that, massive pipelines, gas pipelines being laid. I mentioned earlier already the $2.8 billion Kuta to Kaduna to Kano, which is going to not only industrialize the north, but we're going to extend that through the Sahara to Western Europe, selling Nigerian gas through pipeline to Western Europe for the first time, earning massive foreign exchange in the process. Then we've put in place the modalities for the Nigeria-Morocco gas pipeline, which is going to take Nigerian gas from the Niger Delta through the Atlantic Ocean on the ocean lines of 15 West African countries, taking it up to Spain, which will further service Western Europe in terms of their gas needs, especially as we move to very quickly replace the supply that Russia has now left behind, given the geopolitical crisis in that region now. So there is a lot going on. Now, what His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu is going to do is he's going to be doubling down on that. He's going to make sure that all of these viable projects that have been put in place are concluded successfully and efficiently. And wherever, based on his expertise, that he needs to make interventions to make certain projects more efficient and to obviously add new projects, new pipelines, and new infrastructure across the country, he's going to do that. And I can inform you that we're already at a very advanced stage of negotiation on the NLNG Train 8, which is even going to further expand our gas production capacity. So there is so much to look forward to, and I believe Nigerians in the oil and gas sector understand that, and I haven't even begun to talk about refining. We have the Port Harcourt refinery that's going to be bringing out first oil in about 30 years as of January, as of next month, I believe.
Then we're going to now we have work about to commence on the Wari refinery and the Kaduna refinery, even as we work to incentivize further private investment in refinery establishment across the country. We all know about Dangote, which is coming on stream in the first quarter of next year. But then we also have in place the massive refinery, 200,000 barrels per day refinery being built in Akwa Ibom State by BUA under Abdul Samad Rabiu, and many other refineries that we're incentivizing through tax exemptions and rebates and the like. So there is a lot that His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu is going to be bringing to bear in the oil and gas sector, and Nigerians have every reason to be excited about it.
All right, let's still talk about your party's manifesto. In the 80-page document, Renewed Hope 2023 Action Plan for a Better Nigeria, the party's candidates promised to diversify the economy. And I'm sure you know Nigerians have heard so much about diversification for years without much change. How does he want to do things differently?
Well, you know, Nigerians for decades had been hearing this term, oh, economic diversification, we move away from oil and gas and all of that. But Nigerians know that it had not been happening. Nigerians know that it had not been on ground. But they also know that since 2015, it's been very, very clear that under the progressive leadership, under the governing party, the All Progressives Congress, what have we seen? We have seen the provision of over 1.2 trillion naira to over 3 million farmers through the Anchor Borrowers Program, which has led to a massive substitution of billions of dollars annually worth of rice imports from Vietnam, South Korea, and the like, replacing that with local production that had been sourced from Nigerian farmers that had benefited with seedlings and low-interest capital and instruments from the Anchor Borrowers Program. In addition to that, the Bank of Agriculture has given out hundreds of billions of naira worth of very low-interest capital to hundreds of thousands of more farmers across the country. So when we talk about agriculture, that has already been done. Now, on that front, His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu is now adding really what I think is going to be a game-changing innovation, where he's going to be emphasizing on really two distinct target demographics in terms of job creation. One is the urban youth, and one is the rural youth. When we talk about the rural youth, that is many of our millions of young Nigerians who have not had the opportunity to go to secondary school, university, and vocational and technical education centers. What we're going to be doing is we're going to establish a national land clearing exercise. As we speak today, my sister, only 35% of all arable land in this country is presently under cultivation, meaning 2/3 of all of our arable, cultivatable land is lying fallow, not productive in any way. So what His Excellency Asiwaju Tinubu is saying is that by the end of his first term in 2027, we will raise that percentage from 35% of all arable land under cultivation to 65% of all arable land under cultivation. And how we get there is by employing millions of rural youth across every constituency of this country, all the geopolitical zones, all the senatorial districts, and we empower them and give them the tools they need and the salaries and stipends they need to be able to go out and engage massive land clearing to ensure that we create these cultivatable lands for our new generation of young farmers to come on and create sustainable living standards for themselves, livelihoods for themselves, all while enhancing our local production, not just for domestic consumption, but also for mass quality export to international markets. That is the agricultural plan of His Excellency Asiwaju Tinubu. While doing that, he's focused on ensuring that we establish the commodity boards across the country. So we set basic minimum prices of all of the staple items and all of the crops across the country so that we disincentivize the situation where Nigerian farmers are benefiting from government incentivization through the Anchor Borrowers Program and the like to produce, and then they take that produce over the border to Niger, to Benin Republic and the like, and sell it at different ranges of profit. What we're going to do with these commodity boards is standardize the pricing regimes across the country, setting that basic minimum so that there's an assurance given to our farmers that their produce will be off-taken by both consumers and even by government and privately owned crop storage facilities across the country so that they don't have to engage in that kind of sharp practice. And then thirdly, and this is very important, the federal government under His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu is going to set up a new incentivization program, ostensibly through the National Economic Council of the Vice President, who will, by the grace of God, be Senator Kashim Shettima, working with the 36 state governors to effectively give incentives to the state and local governments to put in place storage facilities and crop refrigeration facilities across the states to reduce the amount of post-harvest losses that we have in the country. Today, we're losing about a third of all of our harvest due to lack of refrigeration facilities and lack of effective transportation networks. Right now, my sister, very quickly on the last point on agriculture before we go into something else, I just want to note to the Nigerians watching that today we have a situation where out of all the road networks in the country, 200,000 kilometers of road network, that's federal, state, and local government owned roads. Only 16% of the 200,000 kilometers of road in Nigeria are under the management of the Federal Ministry of Works and Housing, our federal roads, 16%, approximately 35,000 kilometers. Then you have 35,000 kilometers or another 16% that is managed by the state governments, but then the bulk is 68% of all of the roads in the country that we see and we travel on that are in bad condition, many of them. They are owned and managed by the local governments, meaning that 130,000 out of 200,000 kilometers of road in the country are under the management and funding regime of the local governments, meaning that if the local governments are not investing, 70% of the roads, 68% of the roads are not being improved, which has massive impact when we talk about how we're going to move crops from farms to markets, from farms to processing plants, from processing plants to ports. These are the issues. So what His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu, understanding this problem, he has said, look, what we're going to do is we're going to create federal government incentivization for those local governments and state governments who are ready to invest in those very strategically identified feeder roads, linking our farms to our tables, linking our farms to our processing plants and the like, so that we will counterpart fund it to ensure that the state governments and local governments enhance their prioritization of these very critical roads for the sake of food security, for the sake of economic development, for the sake of job creation, and the like. So the plans for agriculture are very robust, and His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu is looking forward to building on President Buhari's foundation, but also adding these massive innovations that will really change the game in that sector when we talk about diversification. And I haven't even begun to get into manufacturing and the like.
All right, I really want us to talk about housing and your candidate's plan for that sector. But then let's quickly touch on power. He promised to invest in the power sector to provide affordable, reliable power to drive private sector business and aid industrialization across Nigeria. How does he intend to break that jinx?
You know, this is one of the stories that if you have an opportunity to listen to His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu, he will tell you about what he attempted to do in 1999, 2000, within the constrained frameworks of the 1999 Constitution as it relates to the federal responsibility and the state responsibilities. He had to get all sorts of approvals from the federal level to essentially put in place a very strategic electricity generation and transmission and distribution program for Lagos State, particularly around generation, though, working with a company that's known as Enron that was really big then. Essentially could not get the approvals from the federal level under President Olusegun Obasanjo at that time, simply because of political differences, because the president didn't want to be outshone by a very creative and talented governor at that time. But the point is, as president, he is not going to have those constraints. So he has already laid out very clearly that there are a few things he's going to do in the power sector. One of them is we want to ensure that the gains brought by President Muhammadu Buhari in that sector, in terms of the establishment of the presidential power initiative with Siemens, that's the deal signed between President Muhammadu Buhari and German Chancellor then at that time Angela Merkel to effectively bring Siemens on board to provide the infrastructure we require to take our electricity generation from the current approximately 4,000 to 5,000 megawatts in terms of actual, not installed generation, but in terms of actual generation, to about 25,000 megawatts over the course of the next few years. He is not going to abandon that. The principal premise of His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu is that anything that works, we will not only keep it, but we will adjust and modify to ensure that we not only accelerate the time frame in which it is delivered, but to ensure that it is efficiently delivered. So that is still on ground. Anything that's not working, we can do away with. But the Siemens project is something that is in the manifesto. It is something that a President Bola Tinubu is going to take very seriously in terms of bringing it to its rightful conclusion. So that is really going to deal comprehensively with the issue of traditional gas-fired electricity generation. But that does not include, which is very vital, what we're doing in terms of electricity generation from renewable sources. As I just last week, when President Muhammadu Buhari was in Washington visiting with President Joe Biden, we signed a deal with an American company called Sun Africa to essentially establish a $5 billion plant, a set of facilities that will provide electricity to 30 million Nigerians through the installation of various solar-powered energy facilities, particularly across targeting our rural hamlets across the country, where we're producing our food, where we're producing very important components of the Nigerian economy. So this is going to be a major part of what His Excellency President Bola Tinubu would be bringing to bear, is to ensure that these projects are effectively carried out. But then, in addition to that, put in place the regulatory framework modifications to ensure that private investors are unburdened by any kind of federal legislation that would inhibit them from making investments that can deal directly with willing customers.
All right.
We want to have a direct
Mr. Jury, we're out of
service
time. I really wished we had a lot of time to do this. But then, finally, before we go, great, you've elaborated so much about your candidate's promises. But without revenue, all these plans will be difficult to achieve. What are his plans to boost revenue in very few minutes?
Well, first and foremost, you're going to have major revenues let's look at the fact that you're going to be, first of all, removing the fuel subsidy, which is several billions of dollars annually in new revenues that Nigerians will be benefiting from across sectors with new investments. That's going to be obviously a major one upfront when we talk about low-hanging fruit. But over the long term, you're going to be dealing, obviously, as we begin to reshape and reform the federal civil service, that is going to bring its own level of savings as well. In terms of how we're going to be able to enhance our investments across the sectors. Then in addition to that, we are going to be implementing obviously new tax reforms that are going to really deepen what we've seen in terms of tax automation to really expand the tax net. Already, we have been working to eliminate loopholes around through our various finance acts, finance bills, to ensure that new elements of such new industries like e-commerce, things that were not envisaged before, that we close the loophole and ensure that those companies that are overseas, like Twitter and many of these other companies, that when they're offering digital services in Nigeria, that they're paying taxes like a Nigerian company based in Nigeria. These are some of the loopholes we're going to be able to close. And then, of course, when we talk about corruption, there is a lot that is going to be done when we're able to close the gap between the exchange rates, between the official and the parallel. What that's going to do is that is going to now close the chapter on the kind of stagnant investment we have had over the decades in terms of foreign investment, because it's going to bring a level of predictability to foreign investors, knowing that they're dealing with a constant and stable currency value in Nigeria. There are many things that I can list out, but these are some of the things that we're going to put in place very quickly under a President Bola Tinubu administration.
All right. Thank you very much, Ajuri Ngalale, Senior Special Assistant to the President on Public Affairs and the Deputy Spokesperson of the APC Presidential Campaign Council. Thank you very much for coming on Politics Tonight.
It's been a privilege to be with you tonight. Thank you and God bless.
All right. And thank you very much for watching. That marks the end of today's episode of Politics Tonight. But the conversation continues from here. Get in touch with us on Twitter at TVCNewsNG and at Olajumoke using the hashtag Politics Tonight. We are also on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News Nigeria. Join us for the repeat episode at midnight and tomorrow for another edition of Politics Tonight. Digging beyond the headlines. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Good night.
Every major news story is with many perspectives.